So here we are with Matt Baker, and where are you from?
I'm from Sydney,
Sydney.
Australia.
Okay.
Australia.
Yep. And you just told me you're 36.
36, almost 37.
And the phone's ringing, so we'll turn the phone off. We won't even answer it. We don't want to dwell too much on your musical history, but did you study in a music school in Australia?
Yeah. Basically, I started piano at the age of 5, and at 12, I changed to jazz piano.
Mm-hmm.
And my very first teacher, day one, was Tony Gardner, who I never saw or even knew of for probably 2 decades, and he's just now starting to pop up on Facebook and around. So I'm going to hook up with him again one day. But soon after that, Judy Bailey was my first teacher.
Oh.
So I learned from her casually when I was in school, and I was the first pianist in her Jazz Connection big band. When the first day that started, and then a whole line of piano players followed. But so I learned casually through school, and then after school went to the conservatorium and did the 4-year Bachelor of Music degree there. So in between 3rd and 4th years, in the Christmas break, I actually came here to New York for like almost 3 months to absorb the scene, to take lessons with people and do all that kind of stuff. And then after I finished at the con, I came back again, just for a little bit, then again, and then again. And I think I came here 5 times for trips before actually moving here. But yeah, essentially, I had a long time in Sydney. I started gigging when I was 15 in a cafe in Linfield. It was my first ever professional gig. And I stayed in Sydney, I think, until I was, I guess, 33 or 32, something like that.
That's a long time.
Yeah.
And did you think about going to music school when you came here?
I did, actually. I really wanted to go to MSM, Manhattan School of Music, and do a master's degree and, see where that took me. So I actually started to study with the piano teacher at MSM, and his name has just left me, Gary Dial, when I first arrived. But once I started to get into the scene here, and by that I mean going out to jam sessions and going out to gigs and hanging out at Fat Cat till 4 in the morning, I just thought there's no way I can have a day life and be up at 9 a.m. in a class and doing assessments if I want to live this kind of life. Because I was going out, like the guys who come here and experience this too, like every night, a couple of gigs a night, a couple of jam sessions a night, and sleeping most of the day. Because you have to sleep sometime. I don't consider that wasting the day. Like my day was at night between 7 p.m. and 5 a.m.
Right.
So I couldn't do that. There was no way I could have started school here.
And are you still going to bed at 5 a.m?
No, I'm not actually. My hours have changed a bit. I mean, I've almost been here 3 years now, and my lifestyle has... A lot of it is very similar, but a lot of it is different. Mostly for the reason that I work a lot in the day. Like, I teach, I coach, I sometimes played like a ballet class at 9 a.m. in the morning. I mean, that's a rare thing, but as an example, some things as a pianist happen at 9 a.m. in the morning. Most of my teaching or rehearsing or accompanying and arranging, that all starts around noon or 1. So 5 is really pushing it to kind of be up at 10 in the morning and, get the day's work done and then start to do all that in the afternoon and then gig in the night.
Do you still go to jam sessions in the middle of the night?
Do I still? Yeah, not as often. Not as often. For example, I mean, I was down at Smalls yesterday, but at about 9 o'clock I thought, I've got to go home. I mean, because right now I'm actually applying to renew my visa, and I'm writing letters and itineraries, and I've just got to get this stuff done in a few weeks. So, like, I've got other responsibilities now that I can't just stay out at a jam session the whole night. But it depends what's on the next day,
And you were saying you miss having a piano in New York, a grand piano. Do you sort of... Have you been learning things that you would like to practice on a grand piano? Would you do that if you I mean, what would you do if you were on a desert island with a grand piano? What would you practice?
You know, I wouldn't practice anything different. It's not so much that aspect. It's just that, as we all know, a grand feels different to an upright. It has a different sound, and there's different things you can do on it. But there's a few reasons I don't have a grand piano. One is because when I arrived here, I rented one first. I rented a beautiful brand new Kawai upright piano, which you've played on. And so it was much easier to rent something at $100 a month than to go and spend 10 grand on a piano.
Of course.
So after a year and a half or something, they offered me to buy the piano and have all that rent go towards the purchase. So for another grand or so, I now own a piano, you know.
It's cool.
The other thing is that New York has a lot of dust. And I don't know if it's a Manhattan thing or whether it's out here too. But even with the windows closed, I don't know how this works. This is one of the things about New York I haven't figured out yet, is how so much dust gets on everything without like a draft of air or anything like that.
Well, you're on a fairly main street, and most of that's cars. When I used to live near Parramatta Road in Sydney, and I had the same problem. Black stuff used to build up on everything all the time.
So I'm aware of...
What street are you on?
116.
And it's kind of a main street, right, it seems like.
Yeah.
Sort of.
Yeah.
It's two ways, isn't it?
Yeah.
So like 110th is two ways.
Yeah.
And 125th is two ways.
Yep.
And 116th is two ways, right?
Yeah.
So 117th is one way.
Correct.
And 115th is one way.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a main street. And there's a subway stop right near your place. Too.
Yeah.
Subways do the same thing, right? There's a subway at 110 and 116, 125.
Yeah, exactly.
So you're sort of living on sort of a main street in a sense. Right?
Yeah.
Although it's not noisy in your apartment, right? You guys are up.
No, it's not noisy.
High.
I mean, I'm not at the front either. But it's one of those things I'm aware of. Like grand pianos, especially, have a more open than an upright. So it's going to just fill with dust and crap. And so half of me thinks I might just wait until I move to a different area or a different apartment one day, and might do it then.
And so you said you before we turned the camera on that you wanted to tell people all the things that you've managed to do in order to help you survive here. And I just was wondering, like, musically, what you'd learned, what in terms of survival skills, not in terms of artistic things, like not talking about some cool lick that you learned or some concept, but just like what did you learn that you didn't know in Australia that's helped you survive as a musician? Just pay the bills stuff.
Well, there's two things I think. Something that I believe I do better now than in Australia is I've learnt how to be a better sideman in like an instrumental combo or even with a vocalist, but let's just talk instrumental combos. I really thought about that a lot when I came to New York, and I watched a lot of great sidemen play, like Aaron Goldberg and a lot of the piano players. I mean, who do a lot of different bands, and I couldn't even tell you what it is. But anyone who's interested, watch some of the great sidemen in this country or in this city, like Aaron, etc., etc., and you just start to absorb their not their concept, but just the way they go about everything, and not just playing, just the way they support the band and everything like that. So that's one thing which has helped, I think, because I do a lot more instrumental stuff here than I did back in Australia. Like I get called often to play the jam session at Cleopatra's Needle, and things like that, and play with horn players, as in non-vocalist bands at different places like that, which is really fun. It's really great. Because, for another reason, because a lot of the work I do is with vocalists. Like I get hired not so much or just as a sideman, but also as an accompanist. And that's the other thing. obviously I'm working on that all the time, but it is something I believe I did do well back in Sydney. And I guess I'm fortunate enough that it's one of the qualities of being a pianist that I do believe I know how to do, well. And that's one of the musical things that has really helped me here, because I've been able... I work so much with singers. And so that's, like you were saying, that's not to do with anything pianistic or anything harmonic necessarily. It's about supporting. It's about being able to support, being able to leave the ego at the door, being able to just have everything to make the singer and the singer in the band sound better, and to kind of lay a bed of support under him or her, be that rhythmic support, harmonic support, being aware of their melody, what they're singing, so you can choose to go with them or keep away from them, or just preempt them if you know that that's a note they often don't even hit, like getting note specific now, So it's a whole different mentality. And I studied that a lot. I studied accompanying a lot. One of my first lessons in the US back in 98 was with Ella Fitzgerald's accompanist of 30 years, Paul Smith. And just some things that he taught me just stuck and have really helped.
But what did he teach you? That's what I'm asking.
Oh, what did he teach you? Well,
Excuse me, being difficult.
No, sorry, that's cool.
I want to know myself.
Well, he said always come back to the melody. And one thing that helps me do a good job in a company is I always know, because I can hear, it's not a written thing, I always need to know what note the singer is singing. So if you're on a chord and they sing a line, I know they're on A, C, D, E, F. And so because I can hear that, I can choose where to put my chords. Am I going to go with them in the same shape? Am I going to be a sixth or a third below? Am I going to be on their note? But if I don't know what note they're singing, I risk playing a note a half step away or a whole step away. And making things really clear, making form clear, and knowing when they're going to sing a complicated or a notey phrase, or when they're going to take a breath and putting your fills in the gaps, and maybe when they're singing something complex, having like a long chord holding. I've never analyzed it like this, so this is probably sounding pretty textbook, but that kind of stuff. And endings, like, I don't know how, but I can tell, and when you look, you can tell. It's easy. You can tell if you watch a singer whether they're going to hold a long note or whether they're going to go back around for another time. You can preempt all of these things and give them what they're going to want when they go there. There's a lot of preempting as an accompanist. And if you're wrong, you just go out of it like that and you go to the other version. So you're always either preempting or you're with them, but never, you don't want to be pulled behind. Have them on some ending and you're still doing the other one you thought it was going to be. You've got to be prepared to leave what you were doing straight away. And that happens, unfortunately, with beats sometimes. You've just got to drop that beat. It stings, it hurts, but you've got to pick one up, or you've got to.
So whose role is it? Like if you're in a band, and there's a bass player, drummer, and you, and a girl singing or a guy singing, and the singer puts in a 5/4 bar at the end of the bridge, then who's in charge?
Well, hopefully I'm in charge of deciding what we're going to do. So in that very moment, and there's a million ways that this could turn out, but in that very moment, I'll immediately make eye contact with the singer, which is usually not reciprocated because they're standing in front of you and they're looking out. So let's assume that they don't know they've done that. They'll be looking out. I'll try and catch them, and I'll try and give them what they would need to get back on track, like 2, 3, 4. And if that's not working, and assuming I'm still with the bass and the drums, then we may just have to like just go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3,
Yeah.
4, and just so we sync up with her.
Yeah.
And that's one of the hardest battles, is because you're surrendering your ego in that moment as a trade-off to make him or her sound good. There's plenty of people that, and I don't like blame them or don't think less of them, but who want to stand by like, no, this is where the beat is,
They
and
want,
like
they want to let the singer know that they're wrong.
yeah, totally. And if they go through that and they sing the rest of all the things you are, like off a beat early or a beat late, they'll learn from it. But music is about like making something nice in the moment, making something beautiful then. So if we can kind of salvage it then and fix it, and then let her know after the gig, like, you know, or him, then I'm a fan of that. Because it's actually painful to play like that, even if I wanted to preserve my ego, you know?
I was thinking, I mean, this might seem like a weird thing to say, but I was imagining a situation where you were the immigrant in the band, and there were 2 Americans playing bass and drums, and there was an American person singing, but as the piano player, you felt like, in that situation, that you had the right to kind of look at the other guys and say, I think we're here. Is that sort of ever, does that go through your mind in that situation, the sort of
My position,
your sense of your power in the whole
or lack of hierarchy
game? Yeah,
dude, I've been in that situation in Smalls when
Right.
there's been a singer and I've been like literally just sitting in, so it hasn't been my gig. I think that might be a factor. If it's my gig and I've hired the guys, usually that they are going to respect a decision I make. Even if they don't like it, they might respect it and still go with it. But there's been times at Smalls in the wee hours where there's been just bass players and drummers I didn't know playing, and the singer's off, and dude's like,
let's
should we do this? And
let's help the person out.
if the bass player won't move, then I have to go to plan B, which is hard. And that involves much more physical, like as in direct communication with the singer. I might have to shout something. Yeah, that's option C. But shout something out, like,
Bridge.
now, like 2, 3, 4, or point, like anything. Yeah.
So you've done a lot of gigs at Cleo's, and you've, how many gigs have you done there, do you think? How many jam session gigs have you done in the house band in New York?
I don't know. On average, I seem to do like 2 to 4 in a row, and then none for like 2 months, because the guy who runs that, who's a friend of mine, he has lots of piano players that he likes to work with. So yeah, I did about 3 or 4 a couple of months ago.
I used to do that gig with Manny Duran back in the day, long time ago, in 1999.
Yeah, wow.
Cleopatra's Needle. I think the piano was a lot worse back then. I think it might be a bit better now.
Okay.
Is it all right?
It's okay when it's in tune. It's actually not bad to play.
Yeah, it was pretty bad back then.
Yeah.
Wow. And so, I mean, is there anything that if do you think that there could be a teacher in Australia that could teach this stuff to people, or is there sort of did you have to come to New York to get the sense of what to do? And
It's a really hard question. To answer your first question, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of great accompanists in Australia. Like Matt McMahon is awesome, and Judy Bailey is awesome.
Kevin
and Kevin Hart. Like, I feel awkward answering this question because I know I'm going to leave out people, and I didn't think of Kevin until you said that. And of course,
it's not a test though.
No. But yes, but there's a lot different about Australia than here.
I mean, they haven't lived here, so they wouldn't know what's required. But I'm saying, would it be possible for someone to teach what's required from Australia?
Yes, exactly. Yes, but
you felt like you had to come here in order to figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, when I was in Australia and I hadn't been here before, from what I knew, like I knew that America was like the land of Oz. That I didn't know what was waiting there, but I had to go there and find out what was. I mean, I learned about accompanying and enjoyed accompanying before I ever came here. So it wasn't like I had to come here to learn that. But the scene is different here. I mean, there are so many jam sessions. There are so many vocalists. There's so much sharing that goes on here. So anyone can get up in any club that has a jam session. Someone could literally arrive from Australia on the plane, go to Small's Jazz Club that night, hang near the front, and after a piano player gets off, just go, hey, can I play? Sure. Everyone would be welcoming of it, even if they didn't know his name or his face. And he's there now accompanying possibly a great singer who's down there sitting in. And you can just throw yourself into such an unbelievably what you would consider rare or rare situation very easily in New York. So yeah, like those opportunities aren't sort of there in Sydney.
Australia, yeah. Can you tell me some? I'm going to make a coffee. Can you tell me some of the people that you've accompanied at jam sessions that you really admire?
You mean singers as well?
Yeah,
like
whatever.
Singers.
Tap dancers, jugglers.
You know, my favorite experience was with Roy Hargrove, actually.
All right.
And again, this is like typical of something that would happen over here. I was down in Smalls, and the band that was on, I'll look at you now, and the band that was on finished like an hour early before they were meant to finish for some weird reason, and there was this like an hour gap before the jam session.
Yeah.
And I was near the front, and Spike said to me, Spike's the owner and the manager, he said, you want to go and play solo? And I said, sure. So I sat down and I played a song, and with that, Roy Hargrove walks down, walks to the front of the club, sits on the seat next to the piano, which is a performance seat facing the audience, unpacks his trumpet and goes,
cool.
Just blows. And we did an hour, me accompanying him, just duet. And his playing is so lyrical, it was like he was singing. It was just the same principles applied, and it was just this beautiful... It was more than actually just accompanying and someone playing a lead. It was a collaboration. It was like weaving in and out of each other, and it was just beautiful. Cool. Yeah, I enjoyed that.
He probably liked you playing, so he pulled out his trumpet and thought he'd have a bit of a workout.
Right. I don't know how that happened. It just, suddenly he was there.
It's cool.
Yeah.
So is that something you imagine that you'll keep doing, like doing those sorts of gigs? Where's it all heading?
Where's it heading?
Yeah. What are you going to be doing next year?
It's an interesting question, because what I'm doing now is a lot different.
To what you were doing last year?
Yeah. Or particularly last year to the year before.
How many years have you been here now?
Almost 3. Almost 3. And actually, no, there's a lot of truth in that, because the types of gigs I did in my first year, I don't do those gigs really anymore.
Like what?
And it's really hard to know why, even though there's an obvious reason. But for example, when I first arrived, I had no gigs. Like, I just did nothing.
How long did you have no gigs for, do you think?
Well, in the first 3 months, I had no gigs. I did do 2 gigs with some singer who just quickly needed a piano player only because I was hanging out where she was hanging out. But essentially, she wasn't even from town, so she wouldn't have known me from the bar or so. But I did nothing. My life was going out to the jam sessions and the gigs like we talked about. After my first 3 months, I got a gig. Like, I got a church gig. And I had heard some church gigs can pay really well, like up to $500 for a Sunday morning, you know, with a rehearsal. And I'm like, great, this is... And so this guy calls about the church gig. It paid $50
Yikes!
for every 2 weeks.
Yikes!
So it was a grand income of $25 a week that I was earning off this gig. And it was with the most terrible guitar player. I'm going to say it.
Don't mention his name.
I'm going to say it. He wasn't even a I don't think a jazz musician. He played any chord he wanted in any rhythm over any song that was going on, like with no relation to the song, you know.
At least he had a guitar.
Just like, yeah. Anyway.
Could he tune the guitar?
I don't remember. But I did that, you know, $50 a fortnight. And then I got the sack. I got fired.
It's a sad story.
Because they wanted me to really donate my time to the church. And they wanted me to just, you know, give my time for free. So I went back to having no gigs again.
Yeah.
But the first kind of gigs I got were actually not playing gigs. I started to work with vocalists. And I remember the defining beginning moment of that when I was at the Catano Jazz Club. And I was just standing at the bar. I probably had jammed already. And a singer brought a piece of music up to me and said, "What key is this in?" And I said, "It's in F." She goes, "Oh, cool. All right." And she goes, "Do you know how to read music?" I'm like, yeah. "Oh, can you play?" Cool. "Can you rehearse with me?" "Yeah, sure." So next thing I'm around at her house and rehearsing. And she tells a friend, you know. And the next thing, somebody wants charts. Or I saw some people's charts. This is one of actually just diverting, but the early passions I had here is fixing everyone's charts up, because I thought, damn it, if that's the only thing I do. So I actually started to do charts for people, and they've all got my name as a copyist on the bottom. And I think people saw that and go, "Oh, who did your charts?"
Phone
And
number on there too?
no, but you know, Google helps. So I've looked at my directory on the computer. I've done hundreds of charts for people.
That's nice of you.
But anyway, so people ask for charts, and then that's income, and then they rehearse with you, and this kind of network just started to evolve and grow, of being a rehearsal pianist, an accompanist, an arranger, a copyist, and then a coach. I started to coach people in singing as well, vocalists in jazz singing.
Right.
Not singing lessons. Still today I don't call them singing lessons, like there's no exercises or anything, but there's a lot of people, and this is again is a difference about New York to Sydney or to Australia, is that a lot of people love to sing jazz, but they're happy to say, "I really don't understand how to do it the best. Can you show me?" And it might be a timing thing, or endings, or interpreting a lyric, and all that stuff that you and I have done for years and can help any instrumental vocalist with. Singers in this town want to get better, and they're happy to invest in getting their charts done well, or rehearsing really well, you know, hiring the band of their house to rehearse and paying them. And that's the way it should be. Like that's, so I'm proud of them. I'm proud of them for putting that into it, you know?
But why is that? Is that because you think that there's more, they in their own mind they think there's more opportunities to succeed as a musician in America, or is it because they have a greater sense of themselves and more pride in themselves in America? What's the reason for the difference?
The reason that they...
Or is it just a numbers thing? Is there just a lot more people that would like to sing standards, the American songbook in New York than there are? Is it one? Would you pick one of those three? I'm sure it's a combination of all of them.
Yeah, it's certainly a combination of all of them. But the reason, I just think it's part of culture, and I don't know if that's an answer to the question, but the Americans have a welcoming and a sharing and a giving culture. Like, they're very confident. An American can say, "I'm this and I do this and I'm great at doing X, Y, and Z," without being arrogant. That's in their culture, to just to be confident, you know. Yeah. But they're also happy to say, you know, "Oh, I'd love some help with that," or "I really want you guys to rehearse with that," or "rehearse me with that," rather than kind of thinking, because there's a surrender of some ego to say, "I need help with something," or "Can you show me how to do this?" or "I keep stuffing up the endings on songs," you know. And it's like there's no, not battle, but there's no care whether something is giving up a bit of ego or showing it. It's just being real and transparent. So that kind of all that type of work really started to snowball for me 2 years ago. And one of the other thing is the whole way of life thing. You see, in Sydney, everyone has a car and everyone lives out of their car and travels everywhere. But here, especially if you can afford it, everyone loves to have everything done in their apartment. Like someone comes to bring them their groceries, their food, their laundry. They come to have their nails done in their apartment, you know what I mean, and et cetera, et cetera. So I found this. I mean, it's a market. It's a market that it just doesn't exist in Australia, to my knowledge. If you want a piano lesson in Australia, you go to the person's house and you take a lesson.
Yeah.
And you drive them. But here, if you could go to someone's apartment and teach them for 2 hours, they're happy. You know, that's what they want. You know.
Yeah. So you're making a bit of income coaching people singing.
Yeah. Yeah, and again I say it's not just singing like la la la, it's really jazz singing or pop singing and being in a band, working in a band. Like we might spend a session arranging a jazzy hip version of a pop song or work on endings or play backing tracks for them to practice to. So it's all that kind of stuff.
Wow. That's cool. That's really cool. And is that growing or
it's ever growing, to be honest.
Just that particular income, coaching people how to sing, you're seeing a growth in that income.
Yeah, absolutely.
Incredible.
I just did my tax return 2 days ago,
I'm trying not to be too specific about what you earn or how much you earn doing what all, but it's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is.
But that's a business almost. That's just as viable a business as doing gigs almost.
It actually is. I do. That's not in place of gigs at all. Like most times, I work 5 to 6 nights a week. But this stuff happens in the day, which is kind of why I can't be out to 5 a.m. at a jam session every night. You know. Of course, it's certainly a form of income. But I'm really passionate about it. I mean, and I can tell you all honestly, I had this passion back in Australia to coach and teach, especially in this kind of format. But I at least didn't find a reception for that. And it's like people here can't get enough of it. I don't mean me, but anyone, like to have someone come to your apartment, you know, or doesn't have to be that, but just basically to have one of the musicians give up their time to really let you in on how it's all done and how they can improve, because that leads to, I mean, I often help people get gigs. Like I've sat down with singers in their sessions and go, look, here are the clubs. This guy books a week in advance, this guy books 6 months in advance, this guy, let's write him an email together, right? I've recorded with singers and that all leads to getting them gigs, and it leads to it's all a big. Everything helps the other, you know. Yeah.
Can you tell me how do you compare these people? How do you compare musicians on a social level in New York to in Australia?
On the social level?
Yeah. Outside of the music.
Well, everybody's really busy in New York, and of course they are in Sydney. But unless you see where I'm going with this first,
difficult question.
I mean, guys hang around at gigs here still and drink beer. Like that's the same as in Sydney.
What about when the gig finishes?
If there's not a jam session to go to, that cats normally go home. Whereas I think in Sydney there can be more hanging, like you might just go down to the pub or something like that.
After the gig.
But usually, in my experience, cats hang at the gig and drink there, or the jam session, or somewhere like Fat Cat where it's everything. It's the hang, the gig, and the jam. But then they go, and people can sort of disappear here.
Right.
you know, you just may not see someone around for a couple of weeks, and then you don't know if they're touring or if they're just like stoned and like fell asleep for a week, or whether they teach early in the morning and they just they can't hang, you know. It's whereas in Sydney, because mateship is such an important thing in Australia, like, you know where your mates are and everyone's transparent about what they're doing and where they're hanging, and yeah.
Let's see, I'm just thinking, how long have you been talking for? I don't want to talk for 5 hours. Did you have any sort of goals when you got to New York about what you wanted to achieve?
Yeah, I did. Which brings up the question, why did I move here? Is that a similar?
Same thing. Yeah, why would you bother?
Well, I actually did move overseas before this. I moved to London 3 years earlier. But I only stayed there about 4 months. It kind of didn't work out for a couple of reasons. Not musically, the gigs were increasing, and that saw promise. But I really had to think about what I wanted to do in life musically, and I think another defining moment was when I was doing local gigs around Sydney, and there were guys who were 60, 70 years old, who were doing the exact same gigs that I was doing, and I was kind of going, is this it now? Like, is this now what I'm going to do for the next 30, 40 years if I stay in this? I mean, I kind of played a lot around the country and thought, wow, well, not in any kind of arrogant way, but like, is this all there is? Like, I know there's always room for growth and room to travel, but, you know, I'd been in Europe a lot to play, but it's so hard and expensive coming from Australia. And that was one of the moments I thought, I don't want to be doing exactly this, you know, in 30 years' time. I want a lot more. And what I really wanted was to be playing around Europe and playing around the USA, doing clubs and festivals.
That'd be nice.
You know, I mean, totally. So I thought, well, how am I gonna do this? Do I move back to London? I spent a little bit of time in Copenhagen and Berlin and fell in love with those places. Like, do I move to something like that? And I had been to New York a lot, and there were some Aussies here, and that was sort of a nice feeling to know I'd have a little bit of company, at least initially, if I came here. So I decided to move to New York. I remember the day, and it was Christmas Day in 2009, I guess, that I told my parents. Probably wasn't a good move, but at the end of Christmas Day I said, look, I have some news for you. And I was really kind of upset, very nervous, like I was about to tell them I'd committed a terrible crime. And I said, I've decided to move. And mum was cool about it, but my father initially was really shocked, really, I want to say sad, you know, because he thought /said /paraphrasing, like, you're going to give up all your life here. I lived in Lavender Bay, you know, beautiful. It's like next to McMahon's Point, in a beautiful apartment that had full frontal views of the harbour bridge and the harbour. Had a car, a grand piano, you know, income, all this kind of stuff. And I remember the day, like about 2 weeks before I actually moved, and I've got this photo still in my phone of 80% of everything I owned was on the sidewalk, waiting for the garbage, the trash collector to come and collect it, everything. And I've reduced my life to a couple of boxes and sold everything, and then bought a ticket and got a visa. I'm legal, just in case you were wondering. So, what was your question initially?
Just what were your goals when you got?
Well, my goals were like I said, to do that kind of stuff. So
you've done a bit of that, right?
Yeah.
Tour in Europe with a singer. Last year, right?
Exactly. I'm going back there in June, and then most probably again in August, and most probably in maybe October or November.
Great.
And back to Australia, hopefully once or twice this year. And I've started to... My first kind of 2.5 years was all my gigs. 99% of my gigs were in Manhattan. And I've been to a few other states now to play as well. Not under my own name, which is I'm totally cool about. There's no... Like... I love being a sideman, you know, and playing good music. So that's been all cool. So yeah, I'm starting to. If it had to end tomorrow, I mean, I'd be really.
You'd be upset.
No. I'd be content. I wanted to play. I wanted to work on my composing, and work on my playing immensely. I mean, I still take lessons now.
Who are you studying with now?
Taylor Eigsty
yeah.
is my teacher. He's been my teacher for 5 years.
Wow.
Of course, those early years only when I would visit New York, but I see him. I saw him about 4 weeks ago. And
what does he say you have to do?
Well,
What do you talk about?
I first refer to him as almost like my doctor / pianistic therapist. And I said to him, like, I know there's so much cool stuff you can teach me and blah blah blah, but there's a few things in my playing that like I need to work on, that I'd like to sort out with you first before, and I'm talking about over a period of time before. And so that's easily said than done. Like, he'll play something on the piano that will intrigue my interest, and I'll go, what's that, and we'll go down that path. So but essentially, I mean, I wanted to still work on some areas of my playing, and then explore some different areas. But he helped me a lot with all those aspects, like from pianistic stuff, composing, and that led to recording an album, which is one of the things I wanted to do here, which I'm happy I did.
Yeah, it's great. I've loved hearing that.
Thank you. And
did you ever try and record in a studio in Australia?
Yeah, I did. I did 3 albums in Australia. 2 of them were in a studio. One was with a chamber orchestra and trio, so I wrote some classical sounding stuff for a little orchestra, and I improvised over the top of it and played the melodies. Yeah, I was into that for a bit, into some Brazilian stuff, and into... The previous one had a lot of trio stuff on it. So yeah, I did that, but I didn't release them under anything.
Was there any difference in the recording studios in New York to Australia? Or?
Well, I mean, the last one I went to was in Australia was Trackdown, and that's amazing.
A great place.
Yeah.
Not this, you went to Mike Brawley's place, right? Did you?
Yeah, I did actually a couple of things there, not my own albums though. Oh, sorry, Mike Brawley. I was thinking of the guy in Sydney, Mike.
I don't know.
Kerry Bedell's accompanist, Mike Bartolome.
Yeah.
In New York, I went to Michael Brawley's place. Yeah. So there's a little difference, but essentially, like the standard's really high in Australia. I don't think there's a quality difference.
What about the pianos? Where do you prefer the pianos?
You know, I liked a lot of them in Australia. A lot of the pianos here, I do like their old Steinways that have been restrung and refurbished, refixed.
Yeah.
So that's one sound, but I do love playing on a new Steinway grand. That's a cool thing, as well as.
I noticed there's more Hamburg Steinways in Australia than New York Steinways, and the New York Steinways have a slightly different sound. It's a bit more aggressive or something. There's a bit more attack.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Just generalising, but a bit less sustain and more sound at the start.
Yeah. The ones I've played in studios here have been older, revamped ones. So,
And so do you have any kind of? I mean, do you have any way of figuring out when it will be time to leave, or do you have any? Have you thought about leaving, or?
Have I thought about leaving?
New York.
There was
I must say, I mean, there was a terrible terrorist attack in Boston today or something. People blew stuff up, and my first thought was, wow, this, I've got to get out of this place. I can't spend my whole life here. That's what I thought. I mean, maybe that's probably not what went through your head, but do you think about that stuff? I mean, how would you decide it was time to go if you did?
If I decided it was time to go, it wouldn't be based on safety. Like, if I lived through 9/11, I'd still stay here. I feel fine about that. Someone once made a great comment on the old saying, which is, if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere, but why would you want to live anywhere else? And, I just, like, New York is just amazing. Not just for jazz or music, it's just, I love everything about this city. And, I mean, I love Australia and I love Sydney and my friends and all that stuff. But it'd be very hard to go back and live there again. I think I would I get itchy really quickly. I mean, I do when I go back and I stay at my parents or stay at a friend's. I love knowing the fact that I'm only here for 5 days and then I get to go back. I think if I left, I would move on to somewhere else, possibly in Europe, or if I went back to Australia, possibly Melbourne. I mean, the scene's in Melbourne. There's a great scene which I haven't done much in relation to Sydney, and half my family now lives in Melbourne. So, but I can also see myself staying here a long time, settling down, so to speak.
Having a family.
Yeah, it could happen.
Yeah, anything's possible.
I don't know if I would raise a child in Harlem. I don't know. So I don't know those answers yet. But there's so I just love living in Manhattan. I love that everyone's here, not just in the music industry, but in other industries. Everyone's here, and you can do anything you want at any time of the day really quickly and get everywhere, and everything's here. It's so multicultural. It's just so buzzing and alive. And the great thing I love about getting into the jazz, into the music scene again, about New York, is that you can see immediate fruits of your work. And what I mean by that is if I go out to a jam session or go and hang on a gig, these days I can almost guarantee that something will come from having done that. Either someone who I talk to there will call me within a week and hire me for a gig or give me a gig, or a vocalist, I might not have seen for a while will go, oh yeah, and like now think of me when they think of piano players. Or go and sit in at a gig and then someone hears you and gives you a card and they're serious and they call you and they want you to do something. It's just, there's a real direct correlation between what you achieve versus the work you put in. There's been times in the winter, when I stayed home a lot, and it was when I was preparing for my album. I didn't go out much and my work dropped off. And as soon as after I recorded, I started going out and hanging, and I would make myself go to 2 gigs or sessions a night. And that doesn't have to involve spending money. You can eventually get on the door of places. There's plenty of places that are free, and you don't have to drink. That's been a great thing for me as well since I've stopped drinking.
Stop drinking.
Yeah, I'm not.
You decided to do that in America, did you?
Yeah, I did that last August, so it's been almost 9 months. But just only talking about that from the point of view of money, like I know a lot of cats say, I can't keep going out, it's so expensive. I mean, if you go to the Blue Note and then you go to the Vanguard, of course you're going to drop $100 or something, but you shouldn't be hanging in those places too. Like, that's where the big stars are, but you know what I mean? Like, and you'll see some great music, but that's not where you're going to start to form a career or carve out a career. So the places I hang are normally very affordable and like Cleopatra's, like
I gotta go to the toilet, so let's just take a 5-minute pause.
Sure.
I'm gonna stop the camera and then we'll be back in a second with Matt Baker. Hang on.